So today we are having our justice panel, which is going to be the justice candidate panel for our local Athens Clark County government. My name is Mykesha Ross. I am the vice president of Athens Anti-Discrimination Movement. And I want to start by saying thank you all for joining us, as well as taking time out of your day to gather and introduce yourselves and hope that everybody's staying safe. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, awesome. Um, so just briefly, I would like everybody to know how to reach us, which is www.aadmmovement.org, just in case anybody have any questions or want to submit any questions while we're on the meeting today. As well as each candidate, I will have an 1 to 2 minute intro. So you will state why you are running and what district you're running for. If it's the entire Athens Clark County, just state that and how people can learn and how you can bring awareness to them. Then I will open up to the public at the end for questions and answers. So our Q&A will be at the end. But I do want to go ahead and recognize to everybody that everyone was invited to join today. All the candidates, including Sheriff Ira Edwards, was invited, but a lot of them chose not to attend. Even judges, because the justice system is a huge system, and a lot of people don't know that. So we just wanted to make it aware that we did invite everybody. So whoever the opponent was, we reached out to them. They probably didn't respond, or their response was that they wasn't interested. Um, However, we do not endorse nor support political parties. So we do like to announce that we're in the process of like the meet and greet, meaning we want to learn more about you. What's your role, and what are the descriptions of your job? So I would like to start with Ms. Deborah Gonzalez, um, just to take 1 or 2 minutes and introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Mykesha, and thank you, AADM, for inviting and having this very important forum, because as you said before, not many people know exactly how our criminal legal system works. As you said, my name is Deborah Gonzalez. I am a former state representative of House District 117, and I'm currently a candidate for district attorney of what we call the Western Judicial Circuit, and that includes all of Clark, Athens, and Oconee counties. So it's a pretty big area and important. Ken Molden was the former DA. He was there for 20 years and had run unopposed for 16 years. And that's really one of the reasons why I am running. It's time for a change. We've had too much of the same old when it comes to the criminal legal system in our town. And we really need a change. And we need to be able to transform that criminal legal system into a true criminal justice system. And that's the reason why I'm running, to bring that to the forefront. And, it was made so vibrant. The reason why a DEA race is so important. We've been hearing about this story about this young 25-year-old man basically chased by 2 white men and gunned down and killed. And then when we look at the prosecution of these 2 murderers, come to find out that the current DA of that county recuses himself. But even as he does, because there might be a conflict of interest, he sends a letter to talk about the prior convictions of the kid that was gunned down. And this is something that was actually brought up in a former panel of ex-inmates, that Torrance brought up, this idea of bringing up these non-relevant incidences of the past to be able to criminalize even a victim in this case. And there's no way to change that system until we change the district attorney. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to announce, like, I'll just have that go off, or I put my finger up. after 1 or 2 minutes. So I will have Mr. Robert, if you could introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you for inviting me and having me on this panel. My name is Robert Hare. I am running for sheriff of Clark County.
Mr. Robert, if you could introduce
I've been in Athens for 10 years now. I was born and raised in Idaho. I came to Georgia originally in 2006 for the law enforcement opportunities. There are a lot of opportunities here with the jobs in comparison to the wages, in comparison to the cost of living. And in 2010, I started with the sheriff's office, and after working there for 9 years, seeing all the stuff that was going on. And when the audit of 2018 came, it held true or validated some of the issues that were going on in there. And after trying to be the voice of my crew and of my staff and of the sheriff's office itself, turning a deaf ear, I chose to turn in my resignation and do exactly what Sheriff Edwards told me. The reason why he ran, I had been with him 9 years ago when I was a young deputy. He ran because Sheriff Massey was complacent, and so he didn't want to hear the people, didn't want to hear the community, didn't want to be a part of the community. So I'm doing the exact same thing he did. I quit. I put my name in the candidacy for sheriff, and here I am.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that. All right, and we have Mr. John Q. If you can introduce yourself.
Okay, yes, I'm John Q. Williams. I'm running for sheriff because I feel there's one common thing amongst all human beings, and that is the desire to be valued. Whether young or old, rich or poor, minority or majority, everybody wants to feel like they're valued. That's not the case for many people. And to that end, justice should not be subjective. The law should be applied equally and fairly, regardless of race, color, any other status that you have. We have to focus on becoming a society where the culture dictates we treat everybody with dignity and respect. So I learned a lot of harsh realities growing up in Gary, Indiana. Many of my friends and family felt the sting of racially motivated injustices. I've studied, taken notes, challenged the norms. My opponents will tell you they have more experience, and that somehow the office of sheriff is vastly different than that of a police department. Many see me as the underdog, but that's fine with me. Even before I was school age, I had to have speech therapy sessions. It was believed I might have had developmental problems. It turns out, ultimately, I was actually progressing more quickly than expected. I was trying to form multiple syllable words and sentences. I was essentially trying to run before I was actually walking when it came to communication. And since my elementary school years, I've shined as a poet, orator, various things in performing arts. In my youth, I was told that I should be more like my dad and focus on basketball because baseball wasn't for young black men. My very first Grand Slam in an All-Star game in Little League put that critique to bed. I also excelled in the gifted and talented program in the Gary school system, got a full scholarship for academic reasons as well as being a National Merit Scholar. When statistics said growing up in my hometown, I would be lucky to see age 23. I'm 44 and I'm still here. I've beaten the odds before and I'll beat them again.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you. So we're going to open up to the questions now. And these are questions that were sent in by different organizations and people in leadership that are out here first line helping the community. So I will go one by one and ask, basically the first question for today is, how will you work to ensure the division programs are enforced or do not disproportionate impact Black and Latinx people with heavier penalties for the transgressions? So basically, how will you enforce the heaviness of penalties in the Black and Latinx communities? I will start with you, Mr. Robert.
I'm not sure I quite understand your question. Could you repeat the question again for me, please?
Okay. How will you work to ensure the division programs of like equality enforcement and do not disproportionate impact on the Black and Latinx community? Because they have basically heavier penalties and more transgression goes towards them. As a sheriff, how will you put in programs to help those communities?
Okay, I got you. Thank you. That's a very, very good question. One of my platforms that I created was the 4 pillars of action, and one of those pillars is education and outreach. And my plan is to enhance the programs for each of the individuals. It's not going to matter what their race, color, creed, no matter. If they want the help to become productive citizens in society, then we're going to have the program that's going to match. We're not going to have a blanket program that anyone and everyone can come to. We're going to look at their specific needs, whether it be mental health, whether it be educational, whether it be substance abuse. We're going to have programs tailored strictly to them. And one of the things I also want to do is, what the sheriff's office is not doing right now is the rehabilitation or the restorative justice part in the programs after the release. Our recidivism rate in Clark County is extremely high, particularly in the Black and the Hispanic communities. And I got to know a lot of those guys. A lot of those guys I knew, I not grew up with, but watched them grow up when they were in the RYDC in Gainesville, unfortunately going to the county at the jail and unfortunately going to prison out later. And a lot of them said it was just hard for them to try to become citizens getting out. Their past is haunting them. So I'm like, when I worked in the feds in Las Vegas, the part of the programs that we did was just like the diversion center here in Athens, Clark County, except at the federal end. We looked at their program, we designed the program to their case, and when they got there, we got them jobs. We got them the programs that the Bureau of Prisons has set up with, and our recidivism rate was actually less than 0.5%, and we brought in almost 18,000 inmates a year. So I want to get those same programs here. I've been talking to various organizations here in Athens, and some of the stuff that should have been going on at the jail that is not going on, I want to bring back, like mental health, for example. One of our biggest issues that we have in Clark County, I want to get we're already partnered with Advantage, but I want to take that step a little bit further and get them actually in the jail and in the housing unit dealing with the offenders while they're there, not waiting for medical to send the releases out and not waiting for everything to come back. They're on medications, we get them and nothing stops while they come here. For the individuals that take the GED classes, well, when they release, most of them don't finish their GEDs. I want to invite them back in the jail after they've been released so they continue going on with the GED and graduate and actually get their diploma so they can hopefully move on with education or get a more productive job.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Mr. John Q, could you answer how will you or what would you do as a sheriff to make sure that there are programs in the Black and Latinx community to, decrease the penalizations that they've suffered?
I think one thing to focus on is the sheriff's role is not just to directly influence things that are immediately under the span of control of the office of the sheriff. I need to be vocal as far as supporting some other initiatives that are underway. The reform of the cash bond system. That's one thing that's going to help that. Diversion programs. So people aren't getting arrested as much. So that reduces the penalties as well. We have to target the actual core causes of some of these crimes that are being committed and the folks who are doing them. So if we can figure out why somebody's using or selling drugs, why somebody might be committing shoplifting, those things can channel us into diversionary responses as opposed to just arrest. There's a place for arrest, but arrest cannot be the first answer or the only answer that we look at. So yes, the diversion programs, and once somebody is incarcerated, we have to focus on the fact that most of the time they have not been convicted. So we still have to treat people with dignity and respect inside the jail. People will lose their humanity if we don't do such and treat them as such. So that's the next step. Through training and education, not only the public, but our officers as well, to make sure that they understand what bias is, how not to police based on bias, how not to be biased towards a certain individual, because it's not safe or just to do so. Those are the core things that I want to get out there. And there's a lot more things that you can do, but you have to start with that level of humanity. Just being better to people and understanding where people are coming from is going to be a key component.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, Ms. Gonzalez, basically, what impact, a lot of people don't know what impact the DA has on the Black and Latinx community. Could you kind of explain those impacts that they have?
Yes, thank you. And what I'll do is, as I explain that, I'll also answer a little bit of the prior question that was asked the sheriffs, because I think one of the things of the impacts is this idea of collaboration that the DA can do with the sheriff's office as well as with the police department. And I look forward to working with whoever it is that wins that race. But, you know, the DA is probably one of the most powerful elected official that nobody even knows. They don't know what a DA does, which is basically the person who is in charge of the office that decides who to charge and what crimes to charge that person with. And a lot of the times, what crime is charged will then determine the sentence that that person may serve. And when we consider that 98% of all charges never go to trial in our particular jurisdiction, they are all plea bargained out. Well, guess who has the upper hand in plea bargaining? It's the prosecution office that is run by the DA. So right off the bat, the impact that the DA has in the Black and brown communities starts from day one. It starts by me being a representative, the first minority, the first female DA in this jurisdiction. That alone makes an impact. My commitment to diversity, hiring more minorities in that office. Right now, when you go into a courtroom in Athens, Georgia, what do you see? A white judge, a white jury, a white prosecutor, a white defense attorney. The only person of color is usually the defendant. That makes a difference when you walk into that space. And it's very important that we change that. So along with just being present and being who I am, is this idea that I can bring a different perspective and awareness into what is happening to Black and brown communities in our judicial system. The other thing is, you know, we talk about these diversion programs or these accountability courts. In May, we're going to be celebrating the 50th anniversary of the felony drug court graduation. That means 50 graduations in total. That's an amazing milestone, right? 50 programs that people have completed to be able to get through this and get their record cleared off of that charge. Unfortunately, we should have a lot more. The problem that we've had is that the DA is one of the gatekeepers as to who actually gets accepted into those diversion programs or not. And we've had a DA who has sort of said, I don't believe in that. And so it hasn't met the potential that it actually has. I have been a champion of those accountability courts from day one. They're not perfect, but you know what? Until we believe in them and commit to fund them and give them the resources, they will never reach the potential. Whether we're talking about restorative justice programs in our juvenile justice system, or whether we're talking about mental illness and drug felonies. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, thank you all so much. So the next question would be from the community is, what is the definition of law enforcement? What is your definition of law enforcement? And I will start with John Q.
That's a very good but a tough question to answer because it is going to be kind of dynamic to a lot of people. Uh, the easiest way for me to define that is to actually go into why I'm in law enforcement, and that's because I saw some injustices going on, and I just wanted to be the change that I wanted to see. So I think law enforcement, yes, to protect and serve, but it goes in beyond that. We are, to an extent, social workers. There's things that people call us for that you wouldn't know was in the scope of law enforcement itself. But just by the same token, we're trained in some things, and sometimes it's just about experience. So I think it's about community involvement and it's about partnerships. It should not be a us versus them situation. Everything should be community oriented. The community solves most of the crime that goes on. The law enforcement is just those people who hold the folks accountable. They take them into custody. They transport them. They try to stop things before they go too far. Uh, so those partnerships go hand in hand with law enforcement and the community. So community-oriented policing is a key part to what law enforcement is. It's about embracing the community that's around you, and it's about addressing their needs. So don't just go as a police officer and say, hey, I see there's a problem, I'm going to fix it. When I was on patrol, I started off by going door to door my first day out there and asking people in the community that I was assigned to, what do you see as a problem? What do you want the police department to fix? And that's what I focused on. And I think that's the key role of law enforcement, is to look at the community, and especially as a sheriff, you have to be accountable to the public that you serve.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. And Mr. Robert, what's your definition of law enforcement?
Yeah, I have to agree with John. That is a very good question and a very difficult question to ask, because it is a different perspective for everyone. It isn't just enforcing the laws of the county, state, and the federal government. It is also out there, getting out there in the community and being part of the community. One of the great things that I taught the guys when I was working in the jail, some of these new guys that have never been in law enforcement ever, they looked at the inmates as a bad guy. And I'm like, okay, these guys put on their same uniforms and same pants the same way we do. They breathe the same air. Go get to know them. Find out why they're here, what brought them here. Instead of looking at the reason why they're here, look at the story behind why they're here. And in turn, you start learning a little bit more about them. You start, not really creating a bond with them. But when you do move on into other aspects of the sheriff's office, i.e. working in the courts or working in the road, predominantly in the road, is where you see it the most. I always told the guys is how you treat these guys in the jail today is how you're going to be treated in the community tomorrow when you're a road deputy. I could take great pride in the 3.5 years I was in warrants that I've never been in a foot chase that I caused myself. Have I been into them? Yes, because backing up other officers. But I've actually had offenders that I'm serving warrants on that were predominant runners, but because how I treated them in the jail when I was a deputy, they opened the door to welcome me with open arms. They knew what was happening. They know when the sheriff's office shows up, it's not a good thing. But I made it as comfortable as I possibly can. I let them get their stuff. I never handcuffed them in front of their children, in front of their families. I let them be an adult, be man enough, be woman enough to come to the car and answer the unfortunate thing that we have to do. So, and then when I go to places like the Block, and some of the other, I'll say so the white people say, why are you going to the Block? I said, well, when you're with inmates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at the jail, you got to see them at some point. So you go to their environment. I go to the Block and park my car and get out and just talk with all of them. See how things were going. You're not going to know how things are going unless you're out there talking with them. I go out and play basketball with the kids. So community involvement is huge in the aspect of law enforcement, because if you keep them steering the right path, hopefully it prevents them from going into the jail in the future. I got a guy, I've watched come in the jail. I can't even tell you how many times I've seen this man come in the jail. He is now manager of a fast food restaurant. So that's, the community involvement is everything.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Ms. Gonzalez, what is your definition of law enforcement?
So the technical definition, right, is the idea of individuals who are sworn to enforce the law. And that could be at a state level, at a federal level, at a municipal level. I think all of us agree that the way in which that happens is where we need the change, right? Mm-hmm. Because if we only define ourselves technically as a tool of the state to enforce the law, then I think we really miss the true definition of what justice is and the justice system. Because, as an attorney, we were taught there is the spirit of the law and then there is the letter of the law. The letter meaning the language, the spirit meaning what was that law really put in place to do. And what we will all agree on is that most of these laws are meant to keep our community safe. But what we expand our definition with law enforcement is when we recognize that safety doesn't translate into just criminal statistics. But it really means that we go deeper and we find out, why do we have this violence in our communities? And most of the time, it's because of trauma. We have walking wounded in our communities. When we are able to deal with that issue of trauma, we will be able to really address the issue of crime. And so for me, when we are looking at law enforcement, we should also be looking at people who can be resources for the community to get the healing that it truly needs so that everyone is safe on every side of the aisle.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So a question, what is the difference between the sheriff department? Like, what does the sheriff officers do? A lot of people sometimes think that the police and the sheriff officers have the same responsibility, but they don't know what the actual sheriff do. Just me, myself, I know that they give out warrants and, come to the houses, but I don't know exactly what the actual sheriff department does. If y'all can address and let me, Mr. John Q.
Okay, and that's a great question. Another great question. I actually put out a video recently, so if you want to check my Facebook page and YouTube, there's a video there about the differences between the police department and the office of the sheriff. In short, the sheriff's office is responsible for, serving warrants, the courthouse and courthouse security, and running the jail. In Clark County, that's pretty much what they do. The police department handles just about all calls for services. So if you call 911, you're typically going to get a police response. The sheriff right now does not have that. I guess they have the authority, but they just do not have that duty as assigned because of the makeup of the county. Those responsibilities were given to the police department, especially after unification. That's one of the things that I want to change because I think it's easier for the sheriff to get more involved in community-oriented policing and be involved in the community going forward. That's one of the things I want to change for that reason, because as an elected official, I think you should be required and expected to be accountable and to be available to the community on those levels. So I think the sheriff office needs to expand some services, and there'll be some overlap between, the police department and the office of the sheriff, but I think ideally that's going to make relationships between the sheriff and the police better, and it's going to be, I guess, a tool to get to the point that you don't get treated one way in one part of Clark County and a different way just based on the police agency that responds. So the UGA Police Department, the school police, the GBI, the state patrol, the sheriff can actually kind of get all those folks on the same page. He can't write policy for all of them, but he can be a vocal point and a focal person to get everybody on the same page.
Awesome. Thank you. Mr. Robert, did you want to add to that anything?
Yeah, sure. That's interesting that question was asked, because I too just did my video today. That was one of the questions that was always asked of me as well. What was the difference between the two? And you don't really think about how many people don't understand exactly what the sheriff's office does until one time I'm actually on patrol. And this, I call a little lady from Pasadena, this little elderly lady had ran a stoplight. And so I, turn my lights and sirens on to conduct the traffic stop, and she's just driving like it's, Sunday drive. And she pulls into the shopping center, and I get behind her, and she just gets out of the car and starts going to the store. And I'm like, ma'am. So, long story short, she goes, "You're the sheriff. You're not the police. You don't do stuff." So I had to actually educate her on it. It was quite funny. Needless to say, she got away with the warning, because I couldn't write her up. She had no clue. So I started educating people on it, and through investigation, through a little bit of checking, obviously CALEA, which is the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, also didn't know what our functions were. So there is an actual charter from the Athens Clarke County Unified Government that vests the Athens Clarke County Police Department to be the primary authority of all law enforcement functions within the community, and the sheriff's office assumes all the secondary. Now, I do agree with John in the sense that with us being a non-full service agency, we do need to be. I've rolled up on accidents that I could have handled myself. Simple rear end fender benders. We could handle myself, but I got to sit there and wait for PD to come and do all the I could do it myself. DUI stops. We weren't trained in DUI, so I had to basically do the probable cause for the stop, and then had a heat unit that specializes in DUIs come in and do all the field sobriety and the arrest. So when we go to court, now you got two officers tied up in the court when just one person could have done it. So my goal is to actually send our deputies to training, partner with the Athens Clarke County Police Department, and get those training done so that we can actually out there assist. There's no argument that both agencies are extremely short-staffed right now, and so why not join forces and answer these calls so that our community is safer and these calls are answered in a timely fashion.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So just a question. Some people know, the role that we play in the community, and some people don't. So I wanted to kind of ask, do you know, any of you could answer the role that AADM plays in helping to reform Athens' criminal justice system, such as we established the no cash bail for the local audience, and also advocating for the community police board and more like the police task force and stuff like that. So just wanted to see, were you all aware of that? And I can kind of start with you, Ms. Deborah, to see your response of, were you familiar with what AADM does?
Yeah, not only familiar, but very proud to have been a participant in many of the events and activities that AADM has been doing throughout the years, and be a supporter of that work. Because I think, when we look at what's happening in the criminal legal system, we need collaborators. We need to work together, not just those in office, in the DA's office, the sheriff's office, the police department. We also need that connection with the community so that we're able to really address the underlying reasons for what's happening in our community. And, I said it from the very beginning, one of the first things I will be doing when I become DA is I am going to hire a full-time grant writer to help us get these grants and resources in where we can partner with different community organizations like AADM and others to be able to address the underlying causes of crime and violence and trauma in our community. So I have been a great supporter, very proud of seeing everything that AADM has done, and plan on continuing to be so and standing there as an ally.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your support. Um, John Q.
Okay, I too am proud of a lot of work that's been done and very aware. I've actually had several members of AADM attend some classes that I've taught. One of the classes I teach is fair and impartial policing, and I've taught that for 6 or 7 years, and we've had several members come through. I also taught a session of that for AADM at the Athens Clarke County Library. I shortened it so it wasn't a full 4 hours, but just so they can kind of get a sense of what we train our officers in and how we teach them to avoid decisions based on bias. So I was very, very proud and honored to have them reach out to me to try to come and explain that to that group and for everybody that came out to the library. I don't see it as an adversarial situation at all, even though there are plenty of agencies and plenty of groups and people that may not share the same ideas as everyone in the police department or the community, or there may not be a whole lot of crossover. I don't shy away from speaking to people that might have slightly different views, because that's important. The only way you get change is to have those dialogues, to have those conversations. If you only talk to people who think just like you, nothing changes. You're just going to have people that are regurgitating the same ideas, and you're going to get the same thing you've always gotten when you're doing the same thing you've always done.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Mr. Robert.
Oh, thank you. I will have to admit, until I got the questionnaire from the AADM, I'm sorry, I didn't know a whole lot about the organization. Since then, I go on your website a lot to look around and see all of the great things you guys have done in this community. Unfortunately, there is a lot of discrimination that goes on, not only in Athens, Clarke County, but in the state of Georgia and in the nation as a whole. And it takes great organizations like you guys and the Immigrations Coalition as well to be the voice of the people. That's one thing I tried to do when I was working at the sheriff's office as a sergeant. Try to be the voice of the voiceless. And I've been really impressed with what you guys have done. I was really impressed with the questions that you guys gave us to answer once we announced our candidacy. I continue. I am actually part Hispanic myself. I think one person that actually knew that was Deborah. I've talked to her in the past before. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to partnering up with the AADM when I'm elected and do great things for the community.
Awesome. Thank y'all so much. So our next question is, how does Athens Clarke County and the Sheriff Department currently access or the well-being of inmates at the jail? So basically, do y'all do the assessing for the well-being of the inmates that's currently in jail? Is that the police department or is it the sheriff department? And would you work with the county auditor or another third party to evaluate the regular assessments of the well-being of the inmates in the jail? And just let me know if I need to repeat the question, Mr. Robert.
As far as the well-being of the inmates, yes, the sheriff's office does do that. We actually go through a screening or in the classification process. We actually start looking at them for the very second they walk in the door in our booking area to assess whether their well-being or their state of mind, medically and mentally, is fit to actually come into the jail. One of the things that I've been asked quite a bit, and I'm sure John will agree as well, as far as the refusals that happen in our jail. Strictly a liability issue as far as when it comes to that. We have a full service medical department that is in there, and I also tell the deputies, listen to these guys. Sometimes, when you hear them rant and rave, all they want is to be heard. When you're locked up and your freedoms have pretty much been taken away from you, and you're wearing an orange jumpsuit 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you're sitting, laying on a cot with the 3-inch mat, serving meals that even I question as far as their nutritional value, it gets frustrating for them. So sometimes they just want to hear a voice. So just listening to them can also help out with their well-being as well. We take their health very seriously. If there's to a point where we think we need to get them out of there and get them into the hospital and then actually see a physician, because ours is not available at the jail, they're heading over. There's been a couple times I've actually overrode a nurse and said, call an ambulance, we're going, get this person going. As far as cooperating with the organizational audit division, absolutely. They're the reason why I'm running in the first place with when I looked at the 2018 audit, looking at the whole thing and then having the same issues happen to me that has happened to my fellow coworkers and the people that I supervise is the reasons why I am running in the first place. So yes, absolutely, cooperate with them.
Awesome, thank you. All right, same question, John Q. The well-being of inmates of the jail, how do y'all currently assess them, or what is your point of the assessments?
Okay, and again, that's one area that I don't have the same experience as far as the jail. I've taken people to jail. I haven't been there for entire shifts, but I do know that it starts at the police department. Once the police get out with somebody, they're immediately assessing, their mental health, their physical health, all the above. A lot of times that we're dealing with people time and time again. So sometimes we just get kind of familiar with people by name and by address. So some of those things come into play as well. I would say that there is a screening process at the jail, but I think it could be better. I think that state-of-the-art medical facility is not used enough. I think we need more staffing. That's one of the ideas that I have to come up with and try to partner with some local groups. One being UGA. UGA has medical students. Is there some way that we can start getting UGA to help staff us at the jail so that people are more quickly able to be treated? And just being a good steward of the Athens Clarke County citizens' money and their tax money, if we're spending so much time, if somebody gets rejected at the jail, the police officer has to go take them to the hospital, wait at the hospital for them to get cleared by the hospital staff. That could be anywhere from low end is 30 minutes, and that's almost never going to happen at a hospital, but to several hours. Some people have taken a whole shift, or we've had to have an officer come and relieve that officer that was on duty because it was time for him to go home. And so that person's getting paid literally to sit at the hospital. And then part of those hospital bills are being billed to the county, be it the sheriff's office if they were in jail custody, or the police department if they were in police custody and not released to the jail. So we need to be much more efficient and be better stewards of the county money.
Awesome, thank you so much. Ms. Deborah, how do or will the DA play a part in the assessment of the well-being of the jails or inmates?
So not as directly, right, as the police officers and as the sheriff deputies are, but one way that we can is, for example, participating in community organizations that seek to sort of deal with these issues. And mental illness has always been an issue that we've had to deal with in the jail. So, for example, I am part of an Envision Athens Safety Subcommittee, and that is one of the issues that we have been talking about, the kind of assessments that can be done. We've talked about, we have a special unit right now between a police officer and a person who works for Advantage Behavior, where they can divert an individual who really should not be going into jail, should not be re-traumatized in the jail setting, but really should get to a place like Advantage Behavior or another such place that can give them the services for the help and the treatment that they need. Because right now, unfortunately, jails in Georgia are the #1 mental health facility that we have. Okay, and that was the first thing that every sheriff I spoke to when I was a state representative complained to me about. Take them out of this system. They shouldn't be in jail. We are not trained for this, right? And so we are working towards that. In fact, Athens Clark is considered a model location for some of these innovative pilot programs. And so we are working on how do we make those assessments better? How do we make them quicker so that individuals are not going to a place that's not going to help them, but is going to go to a place where the resources are there to help that individual. So again, although we do not have a direct one-on-one interaction with that individual at that point, we can in fact help with other leadership working in collaboration to make sure we have the right processes and policies and tools in place so that we can do what that member needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're close. Going to wrap it up. This is not the last question. We're going to open it up to questions that's going to be sent. But the last question from the organization is, what is your experience with for-profit companies, such as like the bail bondsmen is a good example, who profit off the criminal justice system? And what, of any changes, will you make to the contracts made between the for-profit companies and the sheriff departments? All right, Mr. John.
All right, was having an issue getting unmuted. That's a very big question, and I think to start with, I don't have a lot of personal experience, but I can look at it from the standpoint of, what doesn't pass the eye test to me. And one thing, there was just a recent report done on the fundraising for my opponent who's incumbent at this time. And taking money from bail bondsmen is something I pledged from the beginning of my campaign not to do. I don't think it passes the eye test whether something's going wrong or not. You can't, in good faith, have somebody that's taking money from people who are in business to, receive money off of bail bonds. So that's step one. And then the folks who are contracted out to provide service for the jails, I shouldn't be taking money from them either. There's contracts, and they get that way from a reason, and you don't want to be that person who, just again, it doesn't pass the eye test. I don't know what improprieties may or may not be going on. I say it doesn't look right, and I don't think any of their money should be touching the office of the sheriff. It's a contract. It shouldn't be going on. And along those lines, we can't have everything being outsourced so that it's ridiculous, so inmates can't talk to their family because the phone calls cost so much. Visitation issues. The food being provided by contract sources. One idea I would really like to get is the idea of having a garden in the jail. So it teaches people a trade, because I don't know how to garden. I'd love to learn, because right now in COVID-19, this would be great to have that skill set. So that's something that our jail can actually help in building our society and helping them going forward. So privatized, not for it, definitely against it. I don't think that it should be touched.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, same question for you, Mr. Robert.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. I don't like privatization either. Especially the way technology is today. We have a video visitation section, and we should be able to have our own routers, our own setup, our own servers and stuff, so that the inmates can visit with their people without any delay or having any cost factors. The phones, I'm sure we could get there also without having to use a third-party service. Everything in the jail is recorded. We can do the exact same thing, but we could do it ourselves instead of actually having to outsource this. Looking at the commissary, which is what they call the store, I looked at those prices, the price sheet one time before we went to the computer, and I'm like, oh my God, I am in the wrong business. I need to be a commissary versus being a cop, because $1 for a honey bun? Come on, I can go to Piggly Wiggly and get one for $0.25. You know, the prices are it's crazy. And in my opinion, yeah, we're raping the inmates and their families so that other companies can thrive over it. The bonding companies, I agree with John, that you shouldn't be taking money from the bonding companies and of course with various contractors that we have at the sheriff's office, but also look at the dynamics and the demographics of this county. A lot of these guys can't afford $1,000 bond, $3,000 bond, $15,000 bonds, and given 10% to a bonding company. A bonding company, for the people out there that don't know, they're the ones that are guaranteeing that person's going to make it to court, so they charge a 10% fee. That is a fee that we don't control as a sheriff's office. That is strictly with them. Only thing that we control with the sheriff's office is to make sure they're legit. We run all their backgrounds, their fingerprints, and all that stuff. That's all we have. We have really no control over the bonding companies at all.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
That's learned something new. Ms. Gonzalez, do you want to have basically put your opinion or facts on, do you kind of know, like, or how many roughly companies or people profiting off prison through bail and jail contracts? Would you happen to know or have an opinion about that?
So I definitely have an opinion. You're all laughing at me, but yeah, I'm going to say my opinion there. So, early this year, I'm part of what's called the Georgia Justice Reform Partnership. It's a group of over 50 organizations working all throughout the state of Georgia for criminal justice reform here. And one of the first sessions that we worked on this year was follow the money. And this is very important when we're talking about the criminal legal system, okay? Whether it's bondsmen or whether it's anyone. And we can, the bondsmen, they serve a service, they shouldn't exist, right? We shouldn't have cash bond. That's where the truth is. If we're saying it's based on a falsehood, that if you charge them money, they're going to come back to court, we already know that's not the truth, right? If you give them a call the day before, there are more people that will go to court than if they charge the money. So, and, that's a falsehood. Another falsehood, we now have where they say they're giving inmates 2 free calls a week. We couldn't do that before, right? We're seeing all of these myths get busted about the fines and the fees in the criminal legal system because of COVID-19. And to me, what that means is that all these falsehoods that are being broken open means that we can no longer have those same excuses that we need those fees to be that high, because we don't need those fees at all. Now, saying that, we need to really take a look at this privatization issue, this prison industrial complex, because, when they say crime doesn't pay, well, it's paying somebody. Right? It's paying somebody. A lot of people are making a lot of money off the way the system is now, and the reason why so many of them want to keep the status quo and do not want reform, because they are making plenty of money off the way the system is working now. And that's another reason why I am running for DA, because I hope to stop that leak. Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. Yes. Well, I want to open the floor for any questions from the public, as well as if you all had any comments that you wanted to share. I'm waiting on the questions, but did you all have any comments or statements? Ms. Deborah?
Yes, I just wanted to make the statement. Many people have been asking today about the status of my race. In fact, I believe that I was told that my opponent refused to come today because he said there is no race. So maybe he knows something because he's part of the Old Boys Network. Maybe there's something being planned. But as I know, Governor Kemp has until Saturday to make that decision to appoint a DA so that we can have an election. And this is not about whether I win or lose. This is about 150,000 people in Athens and Okogie not only losing their right to vote, but losing a whole election. They did this with another progressive woman of color candidate for DA in Douglas County in 2018. They got away with it, and now they're trying to do it here in Athens. So what I urge everyone is call Governor Kemp. Again, this is not about me, because just because you have an election is no guarantee you're going to win, right? You still have to go through the work. But we deserve our election. This is the ultimate voter suppression. And so I just want to make sure that people know we have until Saturday. Call the governor. We know it's getting to him because he's telling his person on the phone is saying, go to the website. And then the website says, go to the governor and call him. So call him and keep calling every day until Saturday. We deserve this election.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay.
And is there anywhere they can find that information to call the governor, Ms. Deborah?
Yes, so I have all the information and videos and the letter that my lawyer sent to the governor's office, all on my Facebook page, DG, the number 4DA, or you can go to the website, Deborah, DEBORAH, FORDA.com, Deborah4DA.com. Scroll down, it'll have a race update, and all the information you need is right there, including the governor's phone number. So thank you.
Thank you. Any more statements or comments or questions?
If not, we do have some questions from the Facebook Live.
Okay.
All right.
What's that question?
Okay, there's about 3. So one is, what happens to the surplus money in the Clark County Jail food budget? That would probably go to the sheriff candidates.
Okay. Mr. Robert, would you like to answer that question?
There is a budget every year, as with every department within Athens, Clark County. That's some of the stuff that I'm actually researching right now. Is the budgets I have requested all of the financials for the last several years, so I can review all of that. If we are under budget, since it is taxpayer money and those budgets go to the unified government, those funds will be returned back to the unified government. What they do with them, I can't really answer that question truthfully. I don't know.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Mr. John?
I have to also kind of piggyback off of Robert's. This is something that is not necessarily easy to come by information, but I can tell you what my plan is. The current sheriff is not going to let you have these answers when you're trying to get him out of office. My plan on how to fix that situation is to take it out of, it'll still be under the span of control of the sheriff, but when I'm elected, I actually will implement the position of a financial advisor with the office. That will not be a deputy. It will not be anybody sworn. It's somebody whose sole job is to keep track of the county's money and how we spend money. Writing grants, coming up with other money that's not just to spend taxpayers' money. And I think that's going to help us, as I've said before, be good stewards of not only the county's money, but to get sources funding things outside of just taxpayers. I think every other agency has the capability to do that. There's government money out there to help us do that, be it for positions, be it for food, be it for remodels, be it for these diversion programs that we need to go after. So that's going to be one of the top items on my list of to-dos come next year.
Awesome. Thank you. And the next question, Devin?
Sure. So the next question is asking, what about cooperation with ICE?
Okay. And that's open to anyone or the sheriff or?
It's open. It doesn't, the whole question was what about cooperation with ICE? Yeah.
Okay.
So to any candidate.
Okay. So the cooperation with ICE, Ms. Deborah, did you have an input?
Sure. So I've been very vocal that I am against 287G, which is currently agreements between Sheriff Office and ICE to be able to sort of cooperate between them to hold people and then hand them over to ICE. But I also just today, I just want to tell you this press release has gone out. There's been 61 criminal justice leaders, including 36 elected prosecutors, who have filed an amicus brief against the U.S. Department of Justice attempt to basically take public safety funding for local law enforcement to cooperate with ICE. Okay, so this is happening at a federal level, but the federal DOJ is then putting in this idea of, we'll give you funding so that you can do these agreements. And basically what these agreements do is threefold, and they're put under this really nice name. They're called the Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant. Doesn't that sound nice, right? But let me tell you what it does, besides really nice sounding, okay? What it basically does is it will force local law enforcement to carry out immigration functions that would then erode the trust between law enforcement and immigrant communities. So what John Q was talking about, community policing, this would then go out the window. And it would reduce the effectiveness of community policing models and undermine public safety. So don't get taken in by the nice names that they put on these types of grants and offering money to the community just so that then they can get the immigrant communities. And so I just wanted to bring that up because that's hot off the presses, just got released this afternoon.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Mr. John?
Okay, so let me add on to that. This is why, and I've gotten a lot of pushback because my stance from day one is that I will not be cooperating with ICE. I'm against 287G vehemently, and it's for no other reason. It doesn't have to be for any other reason that it's just entirely unethical and inhumane. I've been a detective. I've been an officer. I've seen what this does to communities that are afraid of law enforcement. We got people who are victims of domestic violence that are afraid to call the police for help, and it may lead to situations where there's serious bodily injury and death because people will not talk to the police. We cannot have the community, I don't care what your documentation says. We're here to protect and serve, and if you're in Athens, Clarke County, we need to be protecting you. There are some instances where people are going to be deported, and there are some things that by law we have to do. And in the instance of warrants, we'll do that. But as Ms. Gonzalez has said, the financial aspect, if you get beyond humanity, ICE is not paying anybody to do these jobs right now. We don't have the staffing at the police department nor the sheriff to focus employees on doing ICE's job for them and spending taxpayers' dollars to do so. So those are just some of the reasons I'm entirely against it. I'm not changing my mind. I don't care what kind of pushback I get. I'm standing strong on this issue.
Awesome. Thank you. Mr. Robert?
Absolutely. I will admit that at one point, myself and Deborah has talked at great lengths also about this issue that I was looking at the 287G program. And the main reason why I don't even know if I can even explain all of it in the 2 minutes that we've got. When I was a warrant deputy, I had the letter group of all the Hispanics, F, G, and H. And one of the things that always frustrated me when I go to warrants, every single warrant that we had for the Hispanics was a failure to appear. So I go there and come to find out that immigration's already took the person who was in the jail in the first place, and not only did they did that, but they ran everyone in that household, and they took family members too. I felt some kind of way about that because now you've disrupted the family. So I was looking at the 287G to find a way to get ICE out of our neighborhoods. I totally agree with my conversation we had with Deborah. We're not going to get rid of them, but they're going to be here no matter what we do. So whether I do the 287G or first what I'm going to do is get with the community and see what they want to do, because the community is first. It involves the community. They need to bring the ideas to up and see what we need to be doing with this, whether it be 287G, whether it be whatever program is out there, I need to find a way to get ICE out of our communities. In the jail sector, a detainer, not going to honor them, because a detainer is exactly that. You detain someone. In the jail, you're not being detained. You're there on formal charges. A detainer is not a formal charge, and John can also attest to that also. Now they come to us and say, I have a warrant, then by law, we have to honor that because it is an official document signed by an official of the federal government. We have to serve those warrants. That's our job as a sheriff's office. But as a detainer, no. And anyway, in the past, before the sheriff reversed his policy on that, he actually came to me when he found out I was Hispanic and asked me my opinion on it. Because there was a lot of issues that I had with the police department in conjunction with I'll say the Hispanics coming into our jail for driving with no license and nothing else on the ABR. I had a problem with that. Did they have a tattoo in their face that they had no license? What was the probable cause for the stop? So when ICE would send the detainer, we're holding these people, and 99% of the time, ICE never showed up. So now these guys are in our jail. We're having to deal with the family members. We have to deal with the community because we're holding people in a sense illegally. They're done their time. They finished what they're doing with Clark County. It's time for them to go home, but we held them for 48 additional hours because I said to hold them. We're not doing that. They're not doing it now. We're going to continue doing it when I'm elected for sheriff. But the warrants on aspect, unfortunately, we don't have a choice with that. So we're going to do town halls. We're going to get the community involved, and people listening now, if you got any ideas that we have, we can come together as a community to keep these guys out of our backyard. Bring them.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mr. Robert. Mr. Gonzalez?
Yeah, I just want to make it very clear. The community is saying no. They do not want ICE. They do not want 287G. You don't have to have a town hall to find out what they want. The answer is no.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I can definitely attest to that with working with the Latinx community. That's just something we don't want because, as y'all both stated, at the end of the day, the humanity behind it, like everyone is human. And I like what you said earlier, Mr. Robert. I say that all the time. That next person put their pants leg on one leg at a time, just like everybody else do. And they're human. And I just don't like the way that they're treated just by someone else's opinion about them. But it is, in fact, a lot of times they're detained because of a traffic stop. And it's very ridiculous. So thank y'all for those answers. I'm going to take one more question and then we're going to wrap it up. Is there another question, Devin?
There is one last question. It's specifically for Deborah. It's can you say what happens if no district attorney is elected?
Well, the issue is not if a district attorney is not elected. The issue is what happens if a DA is not appointed by Saturday. And what happens is basically we won't have an election for DA until 2022. Because of a law that was changed in 2018, which is so ironic because I was in the State House and actually voted against this law. And here it is being used against me. So I know exactly the way all this works, right? But that law basically says that if the governor appoints within 6 months of a general election, then who he appoints does not have to face an election until the next general, which in this case would be 2022. And that is so wrong on so many levels, including that it is unconstitutional. It leaves open the opportunity for the governor to make these pseudo 2-year appointments where they just keep resigning every 2 years. And then we never have another election for DA ever, right? So we would never have any kind of criminal justice reform at all. But the other thing that makes it so dangerous right now in our community, it's that it would then make 18 years since we've had any conversation about criminal justice reform in the DA's office because Ken Molden ran without opposition for 16 years, okay? So for 16 years, this community has not spoken about what the DA's role is, has not spoken about whether it was good, bad, has not spoken about the impact that those 20 years has had in our community. And what we need to do is, if the governor does not appoint in time, I have vowed to take it to the next level wherever I have to go to continue the fight, because that law is unconstitutional. But we cannot let this governor forget, and we cannot let the person that he appoints forget how they got into that position was by an appointment of a governor against the desires of 150,000 people in Athens and Oconee. That is our right that he has taken away, and we won't let his DA appointee forget it. We will not let him forget it.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. And we're going to keep fighting. I mean, our voices matter, and I think that is very important because a lot of people may think that their vote doesn't count, but this is, and I just have to ensure and let people know that we're not endorsing or supporting, but in my opinion, the voices are really important. It will change a lot of things. So I do want to take the time on behalf of AADM to thank y'all and to wish y'all well, to just grind and dig for it and hope, have a good outcome. But thank y'all for taking time out of your day to take the questions and for us to meet you all. Did anybody have any questions or comments before we dismiss? No questions? Well, thank y'all again.